Good afternoon and welcome. As many of you know, each year, Baltimore County Family Violence Unit and Department of Social Services partners to have a conference. And this year, due to COVID-19, we were unable to do our in-person conference. So instead, we have partnered with the Women's Commission to do a webinar entitled Surviving to Thriving Domestic Violence Rights and Resources. And today is my great pleasure to introduce our county executive, John A. Oshesky, Jr., as our first presenter. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I really appreciate the opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to be with you. I'm sorry that we are not doing this in person today, but obviously a whole new world out there with COVID-19. So thank you for still proceeding, but doing so safely. Thanks to everyone for joining this critical effort to support survivors of domestic violence to ensure they have the resources they need to stay safe and healthy. And thanks to all the panelists today who do so much for this essential cause. Thank you for being here today to share your expertise. We are truly grateful. Every year there are over 5,200 cases of family violence reported to Baltimore County Police. Sadly, it's estimated that these reported cases are only 10% of the actual total. And in challenging times like these, we know there's a greater need for resources and programs that help protect victims of domestic violence. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us are staying home more, putting some members of our communities in uncomfortable and or unsafe situations. And we want everyone to know that every resident of Baltimore County deserves to feel safe and secure, especially in their own home. When lives are in danger, we must be ready to help our neighbors and loved ones find safety. In Baltimore County, with our agencies and partners, we're ready to respond and are committed to providing the resources you need. We will continue to do everything we can to protect our residents and stand up for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Please know that you are never alone. We are here for you. Our Department of Social Services chairs the Domestic Violence Coordinating Committee and helps ensure the county has services and programs that comply with state regulations. But we have to do more than just comply with state regulations. That's why we partner with multiple domestic violence service providers that are active in our communities, including local hospitals like GVMC, where they perform sexual assault forensics exams and provide victims with support services. We also work with the Family Crisis Center and Turnaround to support domestic violence hotlines, shelters, and victim services. Even still, we know we must do more, and we remain committed to doing so in partnership with all of you. And I know that's what today is about, providing survivors with information and the resources they need, and learning what we can do as family members, neighbors, and friends to support them. Today, I'm excited that you'll hear from a handful of outstanding panelists who will share their expertise with us, including Rebecca Smith, the lead court advocate with the Baltimore County Department of Social Services Family Violence Unit, Vicki Sneed, our assistant court advocate with the Baltimore County Department of Social Services Family Violence Unit, Rosalind Berkowitz, a forensic nurse examiner at Greater Baltimore Medical Center, GBMC in Baltimore County, and chair of the Domestic Violence Committee for the Baltimore County Commission for Women, and Laura Ruth, legal director for the Women's Law Center of Maryland. These women are leaders in their fields, and we have so much to learn from them. I'm grateful for their work, and I'm looking forward to learning more from them. Together, we can do so much to make our county safer for everyone, and we are here as partners. Again, thanks for the opportunity, and I look forward to the presentations today.
Thank you so much for being here. I've been with the county 31 years, and it's just so great to have a county executive who really supports these initiatives and really supports these programs and makes it a priority. So we thank you so much for coming today, for supporting us, for being out there for us. It's just so refreshing and so nice to know we have your support. So thank you very much.
My pleasure, Karen. Thank you for your leadership and your service.
Thank you. Next today, I want to introduce Laurie Ruth. Laurie is graduated from the University of Michigan, and she grew up in Bethesda. I've known her for years. She's the director of the Women's Law Center, and she's a great advocate for domestic violence victims. And Laurie, I really appreciate the fact that you're always willing to help us in the county. So thank you. Your office does amazing work, and we are truly lucky. So thank you and welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to take 1 second and close my window because the second we started, the lawnmowers started out in my neighbor's yard. So give me 1 sec while they, I think, Scott, you're going to put my PowerPoint up. It's the joy of working from home. You never know what to expect at a given moment. Hi, as Karen said, my name is Lori Ruth. I am the legal director at the Women's Law Center of Maryland. I was asked to sort of give a little bit the legal perspective of what's going on in Baltimore County right now with regard to domestic violence. So here and I was also asked to give a legislative update. So I'm going to do that first, give you a little legislative update. If we could move to my next slide. Hopefully. Maybe, I have the control to do it. I apologize. We're still trying to get used to this.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, some of you may know that the legislative session was cut short. Normally it runs in Maryland from the second Wednesday in the month to the first of January to the first Monday in April. It's a 90-day session. This year was cut short. I think March 19th was their last day, and we left a lot of things hanging, to be quite frankly. The legislators were working really, really hard those last 4 or 5 days, but it's just too complex for them to get a ton of things done. So I'm giving you a few highlights. There were things that we wish had passed that didn't regarding domestic violence and family law. And I put a few in here that are just sort of peripheral to directly affecting victims of domestic violence or survivors, but hopefully they're interesting enough that you might be, pleased to hear about them. I think our biggest success in this past winter in the 2020 session was this, what we call HB 248 or Senate Bill 210. It was cross-filed, meaning there was one in the House and one in the Senate, and just, I'll give you legislation 101. It has to go like this and come out identical in each house from the other house. And so that's why it takes time to get this done. It was amended by the Senate, but basically what we were trying to do was make it clear by statute what didn't seem to be clear to judges, which is that a protective order applies to essentially what we would call stranger rape or date rape, not when you've necessarily been married, when you've been have a child in common, when you're spouses or ex-spouses. Those are already all included. It was this little subset of people who would go to court and seek a protective order because, let's say, they were raped, date raped by somebody they had gone out with once or twice. And sometimes the judge would say, okay, I'll give you a protective order. Some judges would read the statute as written and say, no, you can't get a protective order. You have to get a peace order. Peace orders are of shorter duration. They don't involve the holistic approach of law enforcement that protective orders do. And mostly we wanted it to be the same for everybody in every county in the state. And that's what this bill was about. We were delighted. It failed on the floor in a filibuster the year before. And if you've spent any time in Annapolis, which I know the county executive has, and maybe some others have been down there, sometimes things are out of your control, and sometimes your bill gets used as a proxy or a pawn for some other argument going on that you might not even understand. So it had failed in 19. We were delighted that it passed in 2020. And I'll just back up 1 second and say, we lost Speaker Bush in 19, and then the president of the Senate, Mike Miller, stepped down. And so this year was our first year with a brand new Speaker of the House and a brand new president of the Senate, and a lot of new legislators who are younger and more progressive. And so, I would have loved to have seen what happened to the end of session, because I think we have some changes down there that are positive for trying to get things done. And this passed. The next one is one that's come up and back. I've been at the Women's Law Center since 2008 doing this work in Annapolis, and sometimes you see a bill, it never goes anywhere, it goes away for a few years, it comes back. And I can remember doing this bill 5 or 8 years ago about women and pre-release services. what you see, and again, I work at the Women's Law Center, so this is the type of thing that we focus on, is men in pre-release services got a whole lot of assistance, help, aid, and things, and women got nothing. And so this bill was an effort to equalize that for women who are coming into pre-release to get out of incarceration. And I thought it was a nice effort and a good bill to highlight. This one I put in dogs in the courtroom, mostly because it makes me happy. I think dogs make everybody happy. We don't, you'll note if you know anything that Delegate Malone and Senator Simonero are Republicans. They don't always get bills passed, even when they're well-intentioned, because we have such a Democrat-dominant legislature, but this was a great bill that everybody got on board with. There had been some pilot programs to have therapy dogs in court, and this allows this to happen statewide. To be honest with you, I don't know how much cost there is or who would pay for it to spread this statewide. I did not have time to look at that. I know that there's a dog at Baltimore County Circuit Court that's owned by a judge there, and other judges have learned that they can come and borrow that dog for just this incident. So maybe it would be something more informal. I really don't know. But everybody in Annapolis, I missed it the day when they brought all the therapy dogs to the legislature. I suspect the members down there were happy to have them and had a little therapy session themselves when they got. I saw lots of pictures. It was wonderful. The next one, sexual solicitation of a minor, again, a House bill and a Senate bill number. It allows prosecution for somebody soliciting sex from a minor through a third party, such as by asking the child's parent. Sometimes you see essentially human trafficking happening by family members, and the law was not clear that you could arrest and prosecute if they had solicited, say, my father, if I were a minor. And so this clarifies that you can, which I think is a nice upgrade to the law for victims of child abuse, essentially. The next one is strangulation, assault in the first degree. It's a little bit of a technical thing to explain. Most of the time, strangulation was being charged as assault in the second degree, which is a lower level crime. This bill makes strangulation serious with a higher penalty and a longer time that they can put somebody in jail if they're able to convict. Again, we tried to do this, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and it went, or some version of this, and it went nowhere. But now with new members on House Judiciary, new members in judicial proceedings looking at this, the state's attorneys were able to pass this bill, and we're hopeful that it's going to help. I think Ms. Berkowitz is going to be talking about strangulation later. She may have more to add to that, but it's only been in effect since October 1st, so I don't think we'll see the results of being able to charge it as first-degree felony for a year or maybe 2. I don't know how long it will take, but it's a good improvement to our laws. And again, I think Ms. Berkowitz is going to talk about it. Strangulation is very serious. It's present in many cases of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, but it doesn't get charged all that often, and you don't often get convictions for it. So maybe that will help. When you heard, I could just go back for 1 second. When you listen to the testimony in Annapolis about that, the difference between second-degree assault and first-degree assault is sometimes the manner in which evidence is collected, the manner in which resources are expended from law enforcement and from the state's attorney's offices. So by making it first-degree assault, hopefully more attention will be paid when strangulation is charged. The next one, this is just a little prohibition of waiver of rights, sexual assault investigations. I don't know if anybody has paid attention to what was going on in our state where law enforcement or the state's attorney's office would ask victims of sexual assault to waive their rights to further investigation, and then they would end up dropping the case or something would happen and it left the victims, the survivors, with no ability to do or say anything. I pulled most of these descriptions from one of our sister organizations, MCASA, which is the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. And, sexual assault is really their expertise and specialty, although they do intimate partner violence of different nature as well. And so they thought this was an important bill, and Senator Hellman and Delegate Bartlett fought up until the last minute to make sure it got addressed last year. So we were really delighted about that. The next one is a human trafficking bill. Back in 2014, Maryland was the second state in the country really on the forefront, cutting edge of allowing survivors of prostitution and human trafficking to be able to expunge or vacate their convictions that were a result of being prostituted. But our bill was our law was very, very narrow. It was only the conviction of prostitution, not any other convictions. And for years, championed by Professor Jessica Emerson at University of Baltimore School of Law, she and other partners have been trying to expand it to address the reality of, women, boys, transgender individuals, girls, sometimes 12, 13 years old, who get these convictions for all of the attendant things to having to engage in prostitution. So if they can prove that it was through trafficking, they can now get rid of a whole array, vacate a whole array. And vacate means get rid of the charge. It's not the same as expungement or shielding. It's better in some ways. But it does give them that ability, even if they've had a conviction. And I have to say that has been a mammoth undertaking for many years. Since 2015, I think we've been working on that. So kudos to the really loyal advocates who worked on that for the past, 6 or so years. So that was what I had for this past session. You can go to mcasa.org and read their summary. It has a lot of bills that didn't pass. If you're interested at all in that, it's things that either got an unfavorable report or they just ran out of time. So ever since COVID hit, all of us who do work down in Annapolis have been scratching our heads, I suspect even some of the legislators, about what the heck it's going to look like come January. And I'm sure for a while it was like, well, let's hold off on making any decisions because maybe the virus will get under control, maybe there won't be a second wave, maybe we'll be back to living normally. But it's become very apparent in the past, I'm going to say 2 weeks, that the legislators and the powers that be in Annapolis realize that that's not realistic. So it's going to be a different world, as my slide says. We heard, I sit on the Governor's Family Violence Council, which is actually the Anti-Family Violence Council, and there are some legislators on that committee. We heard from a couple of senators and a delegate's aide a week or two ago, sort of an update on where they are in what they think is going to happen come January this year. They have one mandate that they have got to do. They must pass the budget. And so they've got to meet, they've got to vote, they've got to pass the budget. And that takes up a lot of their time in any normal session, but it really is the one thing that they have to do. So they're going to be there. They're going to be there in some fashion. We heard first that from the Senate that the senators would be restricted to a certain number of bills that they're allowed to sponsor. I've heard more draconian versions of that. A lot of this is hearsay and gossip right now. We haven't seen, a dictate come from the Speaker's office or the President's office. So we don't really know how much this might continue to change. But I think it's fair to say that the number of bills are going to be restricted. Each legislator will not be able to have 25, 35, 40 bills that they are the lead sponsor of because it's just unrealistic that they're going to be able to do that. We have heard repeatedly, and I believe this will stay the case, that there will be no in-person public hearings. One of the things that we do as lobbyists is go down there and testify at the bill hearings for the specific bill. And it's a public forum. Anybody can come. I encourage all of you to come, maybe not this year, but sometime, and watch democracy in action. It's really heartening to see that a person from Frederick, Maryland can get in their car and drive to Annapolis, and they can sit in the hearing room and they are allowed to testify. They're allowed to be asked questions by the legislators in the committee. It always makes me feel better about the world when I see it happening. But that's not going to happen this year. There will not be public hearings. They're talking about what they call sponsor-only panels. In other words, let's say they had some legislator had a domestic violence bill that they really wanted, and it was one of their limited numbers that they wanted to use. They might ask, me or, Dorothy Lenning from the House of Ruth, or maybe Lisa Jordan from MCASA, or somebody from the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence to be on their sponsor panel. And then they get one panel, say, of them and maybe 4 people. They're probably going to be remote. We've heard, that they're working on a mechanism. These hearings are public already online, so you can watch them, but we've never had a way to click in and testify and click out. So that's what they're working on for that. They're working on an ability to submit written testimony via either a portal or via email. Last year they moved to electronic filing, but you had to do that in person. And it was laborious, to say the least. You had to bring a little USB port plus written copy. They had to scan it for bad stuff, malware, and then you could upload it. But since we're not going to be allowed to be there in person, they can't do that. They never wanted it to be emailed to the committees because they're worried about malware. So I think they're working on a portal, but we've heard, yeah, maybe. So we'll see. Senator West described floor sessions. Apparently, they sit in a big chamber, the Senate on one side of the State House and the House on the other side of the State House. And Senator West described sort of cubicles of plexiglass that is going to surround each member, and they're going to be more separated. The House is going to have to split into 2 rooms because there are many more members of the House than the Senate, and they'll be all cubicled in. It reminded me of the old Get Smart show when they had the cone of silence, this big plexiglass thing that would lower them to talk privately. So that's apparently how floor sessions are going to be. And nobody knows whether it's going to last the entire 90 days. So, it is really up in the air how this is going to go. I can tell you right now that there are no large domestic violence bills that we've been discussing. We actually think it's a year to really lay off a little bit and let them try and get their essential business done. We have not discovered some alarming happening in our state and our communities that we think needs an absolute legislative fix this year, because domestic violence laws have been, developing, and we've been tweaking them for many, many years now. I think that there may be a returning bill from MCASA, from the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, about a spousal rape privilege. Maryland allows spouses to rape their other spouses under certain conditions, and we're trying to get rid of those certain conditions. We think rape should be a crime all the time, not just sometimes. So we're waiting to see if they're going to bring that back. I suspect that they will, although I can't promise it. So that's it. We don't know what's going to happen, but you're welcome to sign up for the Women's Law Center's legislative alerts, MCASA's legislative alerts. I think House of Ruth may have them. The Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence may have them as well. And, we keep you informed. We ask you to call when we can. Like if we say, if you live in the 42nd district, please call your delegate and your senator and tell them you support Bill XXX. And those calls matter. We know that those legislators count. They say, oh my gosh, I've gotten 40 calls on this bill today. I guess I really need to take it seriously. So that's the legislative piece. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about protective orders in Maryland, Baltimore County in particular. I just give you the site here where you can find it. If you ever wanted to Google, you can now read all of this online. It's Maryland's Family Law Article 4-501 et sec means and sequential. So it goes up to about 511 or something. Where do you apply for an order of protection? If the courts are open, you can apply at the district courts or the circuit court. Baltimore County has one circuit court at 401 Bosley Avenue, and 3 district courts that I'll show you on my next slide. If the courts are closed, you go to the court commissioner's office. The commissioners are located at the district court locations. So this past year, not only was there COVID, but the Towson office at 120 East Chesapeake, the Towson District Court, had to redo its entire HVAC system, and they were moving right when COVID hit. And what they did was move to what I'm calling New Catonsville and closed Towson. About 2 weeks ago, they moved back from New Catonsville to Towson. So now we again have 3 district court locations, Towson, which is about 4 blocks away from the circuit court, one in Essex, which you often hear called Kelso, and now we have what's now designated as New Catonsville. Maybe in 10 or 20 years it'll just be Catonsville again, but not to be confused with the location on Walker Avenue, which is now closed and hasn't had a commissioner during the whole time of COVID for various reasons. It's a county building, and it's being turned back to the county, who I believe is turning it over to UMBC. New Catonsville is beautiful. It's big. The courtrooms are very large compared to Towson and Essex. And House of Ruth will have a location in New Catonsville. So if you're seeking protection, you can, and you go to that location, you can use the House of Ruth office there. Here were some COVID considerations, and I'll get to the law a little bit after this. Somebody needs to tell me if I'm running out of time. Somebody on the panel, please. COVID considerations. I mean, what we saw in March and April was pandemonium, and nothing was working well, and the courts were really trying hard to figure out what to do. They closed the courthouses, and all you were allowed to do was go to a commissioner and get what's called an interim protection order from the commissioner, and then they worked on trying to get ones that they thought really needed to be in front of a judge moved over to be seen in front of a judge. So our attorneys had nothing to do for quite a while, and then they had some things to do. And now the courts are fully reopened. You can go to the district or circuit court to get a temporary protective order when the courts are open. When they're closed, you still have to go to the commissioner. But here's what we don't know. If there's a big resurgence, the courts may have to close again. We know that you must wear a mask. They take your temperature at the door and ask you that sort of series or 5 or 6 questions that we've all gotten used to if we've gone, anywhere. Even when I go to the doctor, they ask me that series of questions. You cannot bring excess people. The good news is they seem to be allowing the advocates back, who 2 of them are going to speak to you later today, Rebecca and her colleague. So that's, at least there's somebody there who can offer you some support or whatnot. But gone are the days of bringing your mother, your father, your sister, your best friend, and 3 of your children. They're just not going to allow that many people into the courthouse or the courtroom. If you have a witness, the witness can certainly come. So if my mom saw my husband punch me, my mother can come to be my witness. That's not a problem. You can request a remote hearing. It is entirely discretionary to the court. To be quite frank, I have found Baltimore County to be one of the more difficult ones about remote hearings. Not the circuit court so much. They seem to have adapted pretty well, but the district courts are doing most of these in person. We had a case with an 82-year-old survivor. We made repeated requests for it to be held remote, and were denied each time. And, she's clearly high risk because of her age. In fact, the respondent was high risk, too, because of his age. But for whatever reason, the court denied it. I prefer the Harford County. Harford County has a presumption of remote hearing, and you have to ask for it to be in person, which to me makes a lot more public health and public safety sense. They have devised ways to put evidence in. They have a portal. You can submit your evidence 2 or 3 days in advance. You can do it by phone and or video, depending upon people's ability. They seem to have grasped that not everybody has high technology at home, and they have worked through those sorts of issues. The nice part about about remote hearings is what we found is it's nicer and safer and feels better for victim survivors not to have to see their abuser in person. And, any of you who have experienced domestic violence, everybody knows that look. that eyeballing that abusers give their victim that is nonverbal but completely communicates the risk that that person is in by doing what they're doing, which is seeking the protection of the court that they're allowed to seek. So there are some benefits to remote hearings that are hard to convince the court are worthwhile because of broader feelings of right to confrontation and right to see the person who's accusing you and whatnot. This is a civil matter, but some of those constitutional criminal rights sort of bleed over into this, I think, in philosophy. If you do have a lot of evidence, I would suggest that you seek a lawyer, and I'll talk to you about availability of free lawyers towards the end of this. But it can be complicated to enter evidence, and then if you have to enter it remotely, that's an additional challenge. Thank you, Karen. So some courts we have seen, and this is statewide, not just Baltimore County, and to be honest with you, I have not seen it in Baltimore County, but we are only in a fraction of the cases that occur in Baltimore County, but they've been reluctant to order the abuser out of the home. So I'm not sure how beneficial a protective order is when it says don't abuse your wife, but you're still living together. He's already not supposed to or allowed to abuse me. That's criminal assault. So if they don't vacate and give me the distance and safety of not having to be in the same home with him, that's not so great to me. Again, I haven't seen it a lot. I'd love to hear if people have seen it because we are trying to work with the courts to explain to them that that's not really providing safety and relief to survivors. And then in my broader practice, we do, custody, divorce, and whatnot. And what we have seen is a tremendous struggle about exchanging children within different homes because of different philosophies about COVID behavior, because of different people in the household. I might have an immune-suppressed grandparent in the home. I might have somebody with cancer in the home. I might be elderly or have, severe asthma and not want to be around it, but my ex, the father of my child doesn't care about any of that and goes out to parties or whatever. So it's complicated, and I don't have a lot to say about what I think will happen if you withhold your child due to those COVID concerns. I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to go quickly, but you can find this online at the People's Law Library. You can just Google Maryland People's Law Library. They have a whole section on domestic violence. You can look at the Women's Law Center's website. You can look at House of Ruth's website. Basically, in Maryland, you can either get a protection order or a peace order. And as I said about that bill at the beginning, what we were trying to do is make sure that one category of people could get the protective order and weren't required to only seek the peace order, which is less than in some ways. But it's familial. If I could speak generally, here's the list. I won't go over it. If you're not in one of these relationships, you can only seek a peace order, not a protective order. Abuse is defined by the statute. I think one of the biggest problems people have is financial power and control, coercive control, and emotional abuse. They don't really, you'll see, they're not really on this list. The law developed 30 years ago. They have been looking, and in Annapolis, it's a little bit of a stretch to try and get them to look beyond physical violence and realize the reality of people living in these coercive control type of environments. So, assault in any degree, which includes battery, an act causing serious bodily harm, that's just physical abuse. Threats, there are some problems with threats. Sometimes they're considered contingencies. So it's like, if you leave me, I will kill you. Some judges will deny that protective order, even though he's got a gun, even though he's taken acts to say, look, and this is how I'm going to do it. You just don't know until you're in front of the judge. Rape or sexual offense or attempted rape or sexual offense, false imprisonment, that's when they lock you in your bedroom for 6 hours and won't let you out, that type of thing. Stalking also can be very hard to prove. And then we have rape or sexual assault within the past 6 months. That's the new bill. We had previously been able to get sexual relationship within the past 12 months, and it took about 4 years to get that. And then some of these judges are not including these more stranger rapes. So in final protective order, you have to prove by a preponderance of the evidence. That means the court believes you 51% to believing your abuser 49%. It's a pretty low standard of proof. It can be entered by consent. There are reasons why respondents will consent to an order. One is they can shield it after it has expired. Two is if there are criminal charges against them, they might not want to testify here, and so they'll consent so that you don't get sort of a free bite at what their story is going to be in their criminal trial. Usually they last a year. Sometimes judges can be really persnickety and say, well, I'm only going to give it to you for 5 months because that's the end of the school year, and then you're going to go to Montana to your mother's for the summer. So what do I care? It doesn't have to last that long. As long as he has been served, they can go forward on a default hearing, which is easier because there's nobody there to give his side of the story. In a protective order, you can get what we call stay away, no contact. So that's vacate the home. Under certain circumstances, with rentals, it can be a little bit different. No abuse, no contact, not even by email, not even through third parties. Sometimes you have to get very specific about that. Refrain from entering the residence if they don't actually live there. Use and possession of the home. That's in marital situations with children if you need the home to keep the children there. Stay away from work, daycare, other family members' houses. There is an address confidentiality program. If you don't want to hide your location, it can be a big help to you. A couple of years ago, we got the legislature to pass that they can award the pet, not really custody. They consider pets possessions, but they can give the pet to one party because we found through research that was a reason that people stay. Sometimes is because they don't know what to do with their pet, and they know he's going to harm the pet if they try and leave. And then we got them to add other relief as required when judges were saying, nope, I can only do the things that are enunciated in the law. But sometimes it's like turn over the passports for the child or give me back my own car insurance information, things like that. I don't know. I hope that the third panel today is going to talk about safety planning. But whether or not you get a protective order, safety planning is really, really important. And I heard a speaker from Turnaround, which is a Baltimore County, Baltimore City domestic violence organization, give really, really specific advice about safety in the time of COVID when you might be living in the same home. Things about where to place yourself in a room, things about don't go in the kitchen where the knives are, really, really specific information. And you can call any of these organizations to get help with safety planning, whether or not you have an order. Certainly keep all your records. If you didn't get your order and another incident happens, you can file for another protective order. And I just put this note in here about appeals because if you don't like what happened in district court, if it was denied in district court, you can appeal it to circuit court. And it's what's called a de novo appeal, meaning it's just as if the first one didn't happen and they start over. The downside is if the respondent doesn't like one that was granted, they can also appeal. So sometimes you have to go and do it all over again for a circuit court judge. It just depends on how people behave. This is our information. I think there's going to be an opportunity later on for you to see more information, but just know you can Google the Women's Law Center of Maryland and you can find us. Our protective order project is in the circuit court. Our attorney, Jennifer, goes to all the district court houses as well, and she just happens to be located at circuit court because it was larger and they give us space. And then we have the class project. I'll be done in 1 second, Karen. We have the class project, which is for collateral legal issues, usually custody and divorce. So if you're a victim or a survivor of domestic violence and need help with that, you're welcome to call our class project. I'm going to turn this back over. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for your enthusiasm and also for your willingness to always help us. Your lawyers in court are amazing, and I don't know what we'd do without them in Baltimore County. They're just great. So thank you so much for being here today, for a great presentation, and for all your help always. Next,
my pleasure.
I'd like to introduce Roz Berkowitz. Roz is a forensic nurse examiner at Greater Baltimore Medical Center. She graduated from the University of Maryland School of Nursing. She's a member of many forensic nurse associations. She sits on the steering committee for the Maryland Health Coalition. She sits on the fatality review team. Most importantly, this year, or in 2019, she was appointed to the Baltimore County Commission for Women. And a huge shout out to the Commission for helping us today and sponsoring this event with us. But she is actually currently on the Chairs of Domestic Violence Committee. So Roz has been a huge help to us. She has 21 years experience in nursing and 7 of that directly as a safe nurse. So I just want to thank you again, Roz, for being here, and in advance thanking you for your presentation, but thank you.
And thank you, Karen. On behalf of the Baltimore County Commission for Women, I would also like to thank our county executive and his staff for participating in this important webinar during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So the topic I'm presenting to you today is strangulation. And I geared this towards the community because I think it's very important for the community to become more aware about the lethality and about how serious strangulation is. The following presentation contains information about strangulation, and if right now or at any point during the presentation you feel triggered by or uncomfortable with the discussion, please feel free to momentarily step away. The goals of this presentation are to have the viewers understand the risk associated with strangulation, to know how to recognize some of the signs and symptoms so that if you see them in yourself or in family members or friends, you also understand how to respond and what to encourage them to do. So as far as the prevalence of domestic violence, in the United States, more than 10 million adults experience domestic violence annually. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner during their lifetime. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have been victims of more serious violence. For example, burning, stalking, strangling in their relationship. Depending upon what study you look at, as many as 68% of domestic violence victims have been strangled at some point in their relationship. It is much more prevalent than most people are aware of. It is also much more lethal than most people are aware of. Depending upon, trying to get the screen better, depending upon, so Dr. Jackie Campbell and several others did some research on intimate partner homicides. Dr. Campbell is a researcher and works at Johns Hopkins. What they found with their research is that victims of domestic violence who are strangled even one time by their abuser are 750% more likely to be murdered at the hands of the same partner. I just want to give you a textbook definition of strangulation. The definition is a form of asphyxia characterized by closure of the blood vessels or air passages of the neck as a result of applied external pressure. Most people think that strangulation is just about blocking the airway so the victim can't breathe. It is not just about blocking the airway. And I want to give you the definition of asphyxia. Asphyxia is the lack of oxygen supply to tissues and organs. But when we're talking about strangulation, we're talking about cerebral asphyxia. So it's a lack of oxygen supply to the brain cells. And the brain cells are very, very dependent on oxygen for survival. So there are 2 types of strangulation. There is fatal strangulation, and that's when the person who has been strangled has died. And there is non-fatal strangulation. and that's when the person survives. And that's the one we're going to speak about today. Strangulation and choking are two different things. When somebody chokes, they choke on a piece of food that is blocking their airway. It's an internal event, and if somebody dies from that, it's an accidental death. Strangulation, on the other hand, is when somebody puts some material or their hands or an arm around your neck and applies pressure. That's an external event. And if somebody dies from that, it's not an accidental death, it's a homicide. The problem is that I realized early on that when I started asking my patients, have you been strangled? They would say no, because most people don't understand the significance of strangulation. And they think that strangled is something that happens to someone who has died. And no, I'm not dead. I survived it. So no, I wasn't strangled. It's very important to probe a little deeper and ask questions like, have you been choked? Or has somebody put something around your neck and applied pressure? And then explain to them that, yes, you were strangled and this is serious. So on the continuum of violence, there's the slaps, the punches, the kicks, the use of a weapon, and homicides in the domestic violence world. Strangulation is rarely the first thing that happens. It's a progression of violence. So it might start out with slaps, punches, and kicks, and maybe threatening with a weapon, but then strangulation is thrown in. And I attended the Strangulation, the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention in San Diego. And what they truly believe is that strangulation is a precursor to homicide. This is a picture of the blood vessels in the neck, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I just want to stress that, again, most people think that strangulation is just about blocking the airway. And when I'm strangled, I can't breathe. But it's also about blocking blood flow to and from the brain. And again, the brain cells are very dependent on oxygen to survive, and they will die quickly without oxygen. And they don't regenerate. Once they're gone, they're gone. So the red lines going up on either side are the carotid arteries, and that's what takes the blood rich in oxygen to the brain. The blue ones, are the jugular veins, and that is what brings the blood that is lower in oxygen and has all of the waste products from the brain's metabolism back to the heart and lungs to get rid of waste products and to pick up more oxygen. Constriction of either of these can result in long-lasting effects. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to occlude either of them. It only takes 4.4 pounds of pressure to occlude the jugular veins and 11 pounds of pressure to occlude the carotid arteries. And you think, well, how much is that? Here's an example. Opening a can of soda only takes 20 pounds per square inch of pressure. So it takes more effort to open a can of soda than it does to strangle somebody to death. This is a timeline that I want to just do a quick review so you can realize or understand what can happen when somebody is strangled. If you look way to the left, it starts at 0 seconds, pressure is applied, and there's occlusion of the carotid artery. So blood flow to the brain has completely stopped. In anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds, the average adult male will become unconscious. The average time is about 6.8 seconds, not a lot of time. If that pressure is maintained in about 14 seconds or anywhere from 11 to 17 seconds, the victim will have a seizure from a lack of oxygen going to the brain. If that pressure is still maintained for at least 15 seconds, they can involuntarily lose control of their bladder. At 30 seconds, if the pressure is still maintained, they can start to lose control of their bowels. In as little as 1 to 2.5 minutes, the victim can die if the pressure is not released. You think about CPR, and we always learn they have 4 minutes. It happens much quicker when the blood flow to the brain is completely cut off and the brain is not getting oxygen. There were a series of articles written and published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine, and I'm going to briefly tell you about one of them. So they reviewed 300 cases of victims of strangulation. This was done by the people that initially started the Training Institute on Strangulation. What they found was that 50% of them had no visible injuries. Another 35% of them had injuries that you could see, but they were very minor, and you could really barely see them. Only in 15% of the cases were there clear, visible injuries. You might ask yourself, why does that happen? Why do we not see bruising? First of all, it's more common to see bruising if something is pushed against a bony prominence, which in the neck there isn't a lot of. Also, if something that is very broad is used to apply pressure, like a forearm or a hand, as opposed to something narrow like a rope or a small belt, the chance that you will see a visible injury, it will be more common with something narrow. If the same amount of pressure is applied using something narrow. Then there are also other variables that play into this, health conditions. So if the victim who's being strangled has something like a clotting disorder, that would make them more prone to having a visible bruise. Or some of the medications people might be on, such as anticoagulants or blood thinners, would make them more predisposed to bruising. Also, things like how the pressure was applied, the amount of pressure, the number of times it was applied, but also how much resistance was put up by the person being abused. All of that plays into whether or not you will see injuries. So what are some of the things we might see in somebody who has been strangled? And I think this is important to get out to our community in general, because if grandma is home and her daughter or her granddaughter were to come home and have some of these symptoms, I would like people to be aware and to ask questions, and then to encourage them to seek medical attention. And we'll talk a little more about that. So some of the signs and symptoms are neck pain, sore throat, difficulty swallowing, and pain with swallowing. One of the most common that we see is that the changes in the voice, most commonly a raspy voice or a hoarse voice, because the vocal cords are also in the neck. Any pressure on them or any swelling in the general area could cause concerns with the vocal cords. And sometimes it's just temporary. Occasionally, it can also be a permanent concern that doesn't go away. They can have a constant cough, and this cough, once you hear it one time, you will recognize it. It sort of sounds like someone is trying to constantly clear their throat. And it's like, sort of like that. And again, once you hear it, you will recognize it again. Breathing changes are common as well. Both difficulty breathing and an inability to breathe are common when the hands are around their neck and pressure is being applied. Sometimes that will continue for a short while after, but most commonly while it's happening. Another fairly common symptom are headaches. And these headaches can last for a couple days. And they're usually fairly severe. And the cause for the headaches is the death of brain cells from not getting oxygen. They can also have mental status changes and consciousness changes. They can be lightheaded and dizzy, and usually that's something that happens right before they pass out. They can become lightheaded, they can become dizzy, they can see stars, they can say they see spots, all different kind of visual changes, and then eventually they can say the room went black. And then after that, they have that memory loss. That loss of memory is caused by the brain not getting oxygen. The cells of the brain, again, are very sensitive to a lack of oxygen. And the part of the brain that is responsible for memory is one that is the most susceptible to a lack of oxygen. So it is not unusual to hear there is a period of time that they don't remember. And that memory loss happens after the loss of consciousness. So they could tell you something like, I was sitting on the bed and I don't remember what happened. The next thing I remember, I was laying on the floor and I don't remember the time in between. That was that loss of memory because they weren't getting oxygen to the brain. And then there's the loss of consciousness and the seizure activity from a lack of oxygen to the brain. Some of the medical consequences, we spoke about the vision changes. The ringing in the ears will drive people crazy. It is very annoying and very distracting. It is much easier to tolerate during the daytime when they are doing things and they're busy and there are other distractions. But at nighttime, when they go to bed and they lay in bed, that ringing in their ears becomes so loud and so annoying, and there really is nothing that can be done for it. It will resolve on its own. Sometimes it takes a couple days, sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months to resolve. The only thing that we can tell them is to recommend maybe turning the TV on while they lay down, the distraction, and also a white noise machine might help. But nothing is really wonderful. And again, the loss of consciousness, the seizure activity, the loss of bladder and bowel control. There can be injuries to the bones in the neck, and that is more commonly seen when the person is lifted up off the ground by the neck. There can be progressive swelling in the neck that can occur, and it can continue for a couple days after the strangulation. I remember I had a patient that came to the emergency room to be evaluated for strangulation. She showed up 48 hours after being strangled. She was evaluated. She had the CAT scan. Everything was done. She was medically cleared, and we gave her good discharge instructions about when to return back to the emergency room. 2 days after that, which was 96 hours after being strangled, she came back and she couldn't even swallow saliva. Her throat was blocked off. And we had to give her medication to reduce the swelling. Women that are pregnant can miscarry after being strangled. Traumatic brain injuries can occur from strangulation. We think about athletes and traumatic brain injuries. They get time off after they have a brain injury. They get time to recuperate. Well, the problem is that victims of domestic violence, they don't get that time to rest and recuperate. In most cases, they go right back to the same situation and get beaten, get their head banged, and get strangled all over again, which can make the traumatic brain injury worse. There are several centers across the country that are now doing research on traumatic brain injuries, and domestic violence, and specifically strangulation. They can also have a stroke. They can have a stroke from the blood flow to the brain being occluded, but they can also have a stroke from a tear in the carotid artery from being strangled. It's called a carotid artery dissection. The carotid arteries have several layers to them, and a dissection happens when one of the layers has a tear in it. As part of that healing process, a clot is formed, and it can happen immediately, a week, 3 months, even up to a year after being strangled, where a piece of that clot can break off, go to the head, and go to the brain and cause a stroke. And most of our patients are people that are in their late teens to mid to late 20s, and that can be a very debilitating event that can have long-term consequences for somebody that young. And the other serious thing is death. I wanted to quickly show you the Get Help cards with the resources for Baltimore County. And if anybody who is on this today would like a copy of them, we can also email this to you if you ask us. It's got phone numbers for all of the resources in Baltimore County, and with each organization, it also tells you what services they provide. The other thing I quickly want to show is the Baltimore County Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Hotline. Someone is there to answer and speak with you 24/7, 365 days a year. And here is their number. The other thing, the last thing I want to close with, is that I can't stress enough that strangulation is real and can have real and serious and long-lasting consequences. If you or someone you know has been strangled, it is important to have an evaluation by a medical professional. The best place to go is to an emergency room, because hospitals have CAT scanners and MRI machines and X-ray machines. And if any of these studies is required because of some of the symptoms or some of the consequences that people who have been strangled are experiencing, the hospital has all of that and would be the best place to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roz. That was great. What most of you may not know that Roz has educated judges, prosecutors, and right now she's also educating our first responders during the pandemic and before that even. And I just want to thank you for your expertise. It's just so nice to have a true medical expert helping us and someone who always advocates for victims. So thank you, Roz. I really appreciate all your help and the excellent presentation. Next for today's webinar, I want to introduce two of our advocates who are going to talk about safety planning, Rebecca Smith and Vicki Sneed. I am so proud of them. They're on my staff at the Family Violence Unit in Baltimore County at the Department of Social Services. They routinely go to court, accompany victims to court, and assist them with criminal cases and also victims who are filing for protective orders. They can assist you with that. It's really great to have an advocate at the court location to kind of navigate you through the process of getting a protection order or walking through the criminal process. They're there as a liaison, not to give legal advice, but as a liaison between the state's attorney and the victim. So I welcome people contacting us to get advocates in court. Rebecca is a graduate of Towson University, and Vicki is a graduate of University of Baltimore with a master's degree. Rebecca's degree is in a Bachelor of Science in Family and Human Services. Both of my advocates are skilled and also enthusiastic advocates for victims of domestic violence and survivors. So I will let them present now. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Smith. I am going be doing this safety planning and resources section of the webinar with my coworker, Vicki Sneed.
Hi, everyone.
Introduce yourself. So we first want to start off by saying that these slides will be very wordy, but we do that because there may be people on here that are hearing impaired. So we want to make sure that they're able to get this information as well. If you guys have any questions as well, you can also put it in the chat, and we can get started.
So what is safety planning? So safety planning is a practical and personalized plan to help improve the safety of a person or people living in or living with domestic violence. So they could be currently in the abusive relationship, preparing to leave the relationship, after they leave the relationship, and also to include additional parties like children or other family members who may be in the house. Because, you know, the person that we're working with knows their situation best, we allow them to kind of guide us with how we prepare the safety plan, because every victim is unique and every safety plan, you know, is unique as well. So yeah, we just, you know, we always let them know, you know, you all know what's best. You know the person better than we do.
So when we are talking about different safety plans, we focus on what is going on in the relationship. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about today is staying in the relationship. So as we know, a lot of people nowadays, because of the pandemic, have had to stay in the relationship, have had to stay in the household with the abusive partner. Other times that people stay in the relationship outside of, you know, COVID, is when they're not ready to leave the relationship. They're not sure that leaving the relationship is the most safe, because as we know, leaving the relationship is the most lethal time in a domestic violence relationship. And also just for other reasons such as finances or children or any of those things. So a few things that we tell people is think of a safe place to go. So think of family and friends who are trustworthy, who the abusive partner may not know the location for. So if you have a coworker who you have become close with and your partner doesn't know their home address, you can go and stay with them if they're willing to take you in. Another option is shelter. So in Baltimore County, we have one domestic violence shelter, family crisis center, so we can help people get into those shelters as well. When you are staying in the relationship, you should always identify all of your safe exits. So a lot of times people go through the front door or the back door. That's the first thing that people think about, but going through a first floor window is also an option. Please do not jump out of a fifth floor window. That is not safe. So we're saying windows, but make sure that you have a large fall when you do go out of the window. Make a list of trustworthy people you can contact, and I'll skip a line and go to establishing a code word. So pineapple. So if you say pineapple, it alerts that person, oh, maybe you should call 911, or can you come here, or something is going on. You could have that dialogue with that person who you trust. You could also say, hey, could you go buy me 3 turkeys from the grocery store? Unless it's Thanksgiving, people are not going to be buying 3 turkeys from the grocery store. So something that's very outlandish, but so that it can alert that person, but not too much so that it will alert the abusive partner. It's always important to keep a small amount of money hidden. So a lot of times people will keep that. If it's a victim of domestic violence who is a woman, they will keep it with their female hygiene products, such as their tampons or pads or something, which is someplace that a lot of men probably would not look. And then other places where it would be safe to keep money. in addition to money, it's important to have your important documents such as your birth certificate, your social security card, your passport, anything like that. And then also keeping a journal of evidence of abuse. This is very important because it helps create not only a timeline, but it also shows the events that happened so that you can go back and you can share that with the judge if you're getting a protection order or something like that. Preparing a go bag. So in Baltimore County, we actually have go bags that we can give out to the public that have safety kits in them, emergency preparedness kits, but this is also a place that you can keep copies of important documents and a change of clothing. I always tell people to bring a snack because when I get nervous, I want to eat something. So I say bring a snack just in case. So the first scenario that we're going to do, I want to preface this with Vicki and I created these scenarios by ourselves. We did not use any information from any of our cases. These are just realistic scenarios that could happen, and they may have happened, but it's not specific to any case that we've worked on. So the first scenario is there's a family that consists of two parents and a toddler. The mother, Patricia, is the abusive partner towards the father, Jason, but not the child, JJ. Patricia owns a gun and has threatened to use it against Jason. His immediate family does not live in the same state, although he does have a few distant relatives nearby. He does not want to separate JJ from his mother and does not want to leave JJ behind to relocate with family. Jason has decided to stay in this relationship, but is concerned for his and JJ's safety. Jason saw a poster for the 24-hour crisis hotline in a grocery store and called for some safety tips. So we're going to now tell you what our response could be for this situation.
So once we would speak to Jason and assess his needs, we would then start to develop a safety plan. So the first thing we would do, well, I don't want to say the first thing, one of the things we would do is to identify places in the home that are dangerous. So places that would be considered dangerous would be like a kitchen or your bathroom where there are hard surfaces, a room with the gun, or rooms without windows. We would advise him to keep a journal of all threats that are made and document any injuries that may occur during a violent episode. We would provide him with resources to one of our local domestic violence agencies here in the county, as well as providing him with hotline phone numbers. So the Baltimore County crisis hotline number he already has, but he might not have the numbers to any of the DV agencies' local hotlines. And then we would also put him in touch with one of our domestic violence coordinators. They are actually police officers in each of the police precincts in Baltimore County. So we would figure out which precinct area he lived in, so we could get him in touch with somebody. We would explain to him how he could apply for an emergency mental health petition, and if he feels that he needs it and it's safe to get, how to apply for a protective order. We would also discuss the go bag and, what he would need to get in there and to have it packed and placed somewhere where Patricia would not find it. So it could be, the trunk of his car, or he could leave it with a friend or a family member that he trusted. We always advise to keep copies of important papers and documents such as marriage license, birth certificate, social security cards, either with the go bag or on his person if he can do that. We would also recommend that he communicate with either a trusted family member or friend the situation and determine if someone would be able to take him and his son in case things did escalate further. And then we would also, recommend that he share his safety plan with trusted friends and family members, and also to begin individual or group domestic violence therapy. The three DV organizations in the county all provide therapy for victims at no cost. So we would, try and get him linked up with those resources.
So I also really quickly wanted to go over the child safety plan. Since there is a child in this scenario, Even though he is a toddler, it would probably be better to do this with an older child. But it's really important that children have some safety plans in place as well. So something that they can think of when they get scared, that's really important, because if they hear mommy and daddy fighting, or mommy and mommy, whatever the case may be, they can think about this and they can feel more safe in this situation. When I get scared, I can go to, so a lot of times children will go and hide in the bathtub, because that is a place that's away from everyone and it's their own little sanctuary kind of thing. If there's a fight in my house, I will try not to stop it. I will go to, and then again, something like the bathtub or my bedroom or something like that to be safe. It's really important that children know not to get involved, because a lot of times they end up being, and I hate to say this, but collateral damage. They end up getting hurt in the actual assault between the parents, and we do not want that. In an emergency, I can dial 911 and tell them whatever. So it's really important that children know what 911 is and when to use it appropriately. They should also know that they can text it for emergency purposes if it's not safe to call. So how to address the person on the other side of the line. So my name is whatever their name is, my address is blah, blah, blah. I need help, someone's being hurt in my house, and send the police. So these are all things that children should be aware of, especially when there is abuse going on in the home. But even if there isn't, it's still important for children to know.
So we do come in contact with a lot of victims who are leaving or have just recently left the relationship. Studies have shown that within the first 48 to 72 hours after leaving the relationship is the most dangerous time for the victim. So something that we discuss with all victims once they've left a relationship, another way to safety plan is to change all of their phone numbers and passwords, like email passwords, social media passwords, to screen all phone calls. I mean, all of our cell phones have a caller ID, so just screen it. If it's, your ex-boyfriend, husband, wife, whatever, have it go to voicemail. Avoid staying alone. So if you can stay with a friend or a family member, that's great. Obviously, there are some people that are just not capable of doing that. But, even if you have someone just come and stay with you for a little bit. Vary your routine. So if your abuser knows that, you leave for work at 8:30 every morning and you're home from work 5:30 in the afternoon, maybe leave a little earlier or maybe leave a little later. Go somewhere after work or, take a half a day so that they're not, you can change up your routine so they're not, they're kind of confused. You want to confuse them a little, I guess. So notify school and work contacts. So if you are in school or if your children are in school, let them know you've left the relationship. Same with your work contacts. And that, you can just let your direct supervisor know. You don't have to let everybody know in the office. Do frequent check-ins with friends and family. Open a bank account in your name only. There are a lot of times where the abuser and the victim have a joint account, and then they will go and clean out that bank account, and the victim's left with nothing. Again, have a go bag. Turn off the location on all mobile devices and on your car, so GPS off on everything. And mobile devices, computers, laptops, everything. Check to make sure there are no tracking devices in your car. You can take that to any local gas station and they can do a once over to make sure. And then apply for a protection order if it's safe and necessary. So we're going to do another scenario here. This is after someone has left the relationship. So Jenna and Michael have recently split up after being together for 5 years. While they did not marry, they did live together for the last 3 years. Jenna confided in friends that after moving in with Michael, he started to change his behavior by becoming more aggressive and violent whenever they argued. Jenna has wanted to leave for some time now, but every time she wanted to leave, he would apologize and bring her out on a fancy date. The last time an abusive episode occurred, Michael did not apologize, and Jenna decided it was time to leave. Jenna is currently staying with a friend from work. However, she is afraid of Michael. Jenna has shared that he is constantly calling and texting her mobile phone, as well as driving by her place of employment while she is there. Jenna was given the number to the Family Violence Unit by her doctor's office.
So something that you could do would be tell her to document all incidents of abuse. As we said before, it's very important to do that, because if she does feel that it is important to get a protection order and it's safe to get a protection order, or she wants to file any criminal charges, then having documentation is very important. As I said, not all the time will it be safe for people to file a protection order. Sometimes it makes the situation worse than it already is. So we always advocate for people making the decision based on their own circumstances. So we don't ever want to tell someone what to do. We do not give legal advice at all. We're just there to tell people that we'll be there to support you with whatever you do decide to do. She can also keep the address undisclosed for safety purposes. So as I think Lori was saying earlier, there is an address confidentiality program in Maryland that will give you a P.O. box to use as your address, and so all your mail can go there. But a lot of times when people are applying for a protection order, they haven't gotten through that system yet. And so at that point, we just tell them to put their address as an undisclosed location, and the courts have no problem with doing that. People, if she wants to file criminal charges, she can either call the police and do a police report that way, or she can call go to the commissioner's office and file a criminal charge there. And the commissioner's office is located in all of the district courts in Maryland. So in Baltimore County, there's one in the Woodlawn, Kingsville area. There's one in Towson, and there's one in Essex. Again, with the safe word, it's really important to have a safe word, to have that kind of dialogue with your trusted friends and family. And it's also really important to alert at least somebody at work, such as your supervisor, regarding the situation, because if this is a person who knows where you work, the job needs to know that this is what's going on. The job needs to know if you have a protection order. Same with schools. If she had a child and the child was going to school, say this wasn't COVID time, and she didn't want Michael to go to the school to see the child, then she could present that protection order to the school if the judge had granted the protection order saying that he wasn't allowed to go to school. So it's very important to have those open dialogues with your boss, with your friends, with your family, with the schools, every system that's involved, really. Some other things that you can do as a response for safety planning is changing your phone number or blocking the number. So a lot of times, even though people change their phone number, which, yes, is inconvenient for the survivor, we definitely don't like to inconvenience people any more than they already are. But sometimes, unfortunately, that's the only way to go about it. So we highly recommend people change their number. But a lot of times, people are able to get these new apps where they can text someone through an app, and it's hard to really trace who is texting. It's hard to really accuse someone of violating a protection order or doing something they shouldn't be doing because it's not directly linked to them. And changing your phone number can really help rather than just blocking that person. Social media accounts is also really important to block people on social media if they are being toxic or abusive toward you. It's also really important to keep your social media accounts private. Another thing is turning off your location on smart devices and social media. this is really important. I have had situations where clients have told me that the way that the person has found them is through apps like Snapchat. Snapchat is notorious for its location settings, and so it's really important that everyone has that turned off. And if you get a new phone or something, it will turn it back on automatically. So we have to remind people, keep turning that off, keep checking, making sure that that's off. As Vicki was saying earlier, varying your routine to and from work. So this is for survivors, but it's also for any of us who do work with this population. So we know a lot of times the abusive partner doesn't necessarily go after many other people, but there have been times where we've been followed from court or from, whatever location that we met that client at. If court didn't go the way the abusive partner wanted it to. So that's something that we all should keep in mind. Something that I do as a little tip is if I'm going from court and I know that that person seemed to be like lingering in the parking lot or something, I'll either tell the bailiff or when I'm leaving, I'll drive to my office and then I'll leave out of the other side of the parking lot and then go home that way, so that they kind of lose track of where I am. And then a check-in routine. So this is also really important. So as soon as you're leaving a place, so, okay, I'm home, I'm leaving my house right now. Okay, now I'm in my car, texting the same person, I'm in my car. Okay, once I get to that place, text them again. I'm at the location, still in my car. Now I'm walking from my car to whatever location. You don't want to constantly be on your phone because that can be distracting and you might not be able to realize that someone is following you. But it is really important to have those check-ins because if you are not heard of, the police will be able to see where you were last or where you last checked in, and they'll be able to do their investigation starting there. And this is for work, this is for going to the grocery store, this is if someone's going to hang out with their friends. It's in all situations. Again, keeping a go bag with you. So if she did get a protection order would be a good thing to keep in that go bag and to have a copy at your house, at your office, in the car, everywhere you can, just in case something happens and the police have to get involved and you say, hey, I have this protection order, here you go. The police can look it up themselves, but I think it's always best to have that piece of paper there just in case. Downloading a safety app to share with friends or family. I will not be promoting any specific safety apps, but there are safety apps that you can use that I know I use when I'm walking alone at night, where you hold down a button and then as soon as you get to your location, you let it go, you type in a PIN number and it alerts them that you're safe. If you don't type in that PIN number, it will send out police immediately. So there are apps that you can use to stay safe, and yes, they do track your location, but at least they're tracking it for the police and not for the abusive partner. And then begin individual and group counseling. So it's really important. There are a lot, we're going to go into resources soon, but there are a lot of people that offer therapy in individual and group settings and also for children. So it's really important that people who have gone through these types of traumatic events get into therapy so that, one, they can break the cycle, but also, two, so that they can deal with the traumas that they have. Because as we know, PTSD is something that can happen as a result of domestic violence. So we're going to go into resources now. There are a lot more things that we could have covered when it comes to safety planning, but safety planning is very individualized, so it's really important to go with the individual's situation and then help them that way. But those are a few tips that we generally say to people. And if you would like more, we'll be more than happy to give you more safety tips. So some of the general resources that you guys should know about are the National Domestic Violence Hotline, the National Sexual Assault Hotline, or RAIN, and the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So we're going to have this presentation recorded, so if you don't write down these numbers, or if you need these numbers, you can always watch that, or you can ask us to send that to you. And all resources are available to anyone who needs assistance. So if you are an undocumented immigrant, you're still able to receive assistance without having to disclose your immigration status. And this goes for calling or texting 911 as well.
So I just wanted to go over our resources in Baltimore County. So we have our unit, which is the Family Violence Unit, and that's the first number there. There's also HANA, and HANA also has a program within their program for elders. It's SAFE. I don't remember what that stands for, but it's for elder abuse. So the number provided on the screen would be a great number for them to call. Dove at Northwest Hospitals on the west side of town, so like Reisterstown. Family Crisis Center is east side. GBMC Safe and Domestic Violence Program, and Turnaround. So all of these, with the exception of us in GVMC, do offer emergency shelter for victims. They do offer therapy and case management if you would so need that. And Turnaround does provide, Turnaround and Dove does provide legal assistance if you needed assistance with a protective order. Additionally, we have some legal resources: Women's Law Center, PORAP, which is the Protection Order Advocacy and Representation Project there through the Women's Law Center, the House of Ruth Legal Clinic, and the Family Law Hotline.
So all of those resources are available to people in Baltimore County, and we did want to go over resources in Maryland. For some reason, some of the numbers are a little bit indented, so sorry about that. But we wanted to go through all of the counties. This may not be the complete list of all of the resources in Maryland, but these are some of them. So there's the Family Crisis Resource Center in Allegheny County, YWCA in Anne Arundel County, House of Ruth, which is in Baltimore City and County. Turnaround is also in Baltimore City and County. They also do a lot with sexual assault and human trafficking. Crisis Intervention Center in Calvert County. Springboard Community Services in Carroll County in Baltimore City. And they do some mental health work as well. Midshore Council on Family Violence. This is the Eastern Shore counties, so Caroline, Dorchester, Kent, Queens Anne's, and Talbot counties. Cecil County Domestic Violence and Rape Crisis Center, obviously in Cecil County. Center for Abused Persons is in Charles County, and Hartley House is in Frederick County.
So additionally, we have the Dove Center in Garrett County, which is out in Western Maryland, SARC, which is located in Harford County, Hope Works in Howard, Abused Persons Program, and the Family Justice Center, both are in Montgomery County. The Family Justice Center and the Community Crisis Services, which are both located in Prince George's County. The Southern Maryland Center for Family Advocacy, which is located in St. Mary's County. The Life Crisis Center, which is located in the lower eastern shore of Somerset, Wacomico, and Worcester counties. And Citizens Assisting and Sheltering the Abused, also known as CASA, which is located in Washington County.
So we wanted to end this off with our contact information. We also have agency cell phone numbers, but we didn't think that it would be safe to put these on here. But I do want to give you our advocacy email address. So I'm going to enter that in the chat right now so that I can, so that you guys can email that if you have any questions or concerns after this webinar. But we have Karen Kaiser, who has been the host all day today, myself, Rebecca, Vicki Sneed, who is the VOCA Court Advocate, and Drew Gebb, who is the VAWA court advocate. We have a lot more co-workers in our unit. So we have people in the co-location portion of our unit. So there's 3 people within Child Protective Services who work with domestic violence cases. Then we have 1 person who's in the benefits portion of Department of Social Services who works with people who are also experiencing domestic violence. So with that said, if you guys have any questions or anything that you want to comment on, you can use the chat box to do so, and we will be monitoring and answering those questions now.
And if you'd like additional resources or additional information, please email us or at the email address that Rebecca provided. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Lori. I just wanted to say our services are free as well. So you don't have to pay for an attorney to represent you in your protective order case.
Yes. So all of the resources that we provided should be free for victims of domestic violence. Thank you for that, Lori.
So this is our question portion. So if people have any questions or need clarification on any of the presentations, we welcome those questions at this time. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the Women's Commission again for their support, and to also thank Roz Berkowitz, Laurie Ruth, and the other presenters today, my staff, Rebecca Smith and Vicki Sneed. And of course, I want to thank the County Executive, Johnny A. Waszewski Jr. for his help today and for all of his support and continued support of the domestic violence programs in Baltimore County and working to help survivors. We're all here, and we want to make sure people know that there is help available. You don't need to be alone. You don't need to suffer. There's people out there that will care about you and help you reach the resources you need to live a violent-free life. You don't need to stay in a relationship that's not healthy or not making you feel good about yourself. Are there questions from the question box?
We have a lot of compliments, so thank you very much for all of your compliments.
Yes, thank you.
Karen, the CE asked me to pass on his apologies for not being able to stay on for the entire presentation, but also his appreciation for all the hard work that you guys are doing. He just wanted me to pass that on as we wrap up today.
Thank you. It's so nice to be appreciated. It really is. And I'm just so proud of my staff, too, for being here today. Thank you. I thought that was very helpful. Does anyone have any other closing comments that they'd like to add at this time or anything they want to clarify?
If anybody would like a resource packet, please let us know in the chat. If you send us, or if you just say yes in the chat box, we will send you a resource packet. If you called in, obviously you cannot chat, but we can also send you resource packets. So if you do want that, then just let us know and we'll send that along in the email or from the email address that I provided in the chat box.
And our brand new Get Help cards, which are a sunny orange color, very vivid, will be out in a week. And they have the court locations updated. So since Towson Court reopened and Rolling Crossroads, it has those addresses. Please don't hesitate to ask for an advocate to assist you with getting a protective order, and then we can steer you towards the Women's Law Center or the House of Ruth to help you with the second order, but we can be there available to help you fill out the initial paperwork at the courthouse and answer questions that are not legal advice questions.
Yes, we are still going to court even though COVID is still happening. So just know that all of the resources that we have provided for you are, for the most part, still working as normal. And then yeah, so if you guys have anything else, you can stay on. If you need to get off, you can always log off now. we also have I wanted to say we also have a digital Get Help card, so it's interactive. So if you have that and you click on the number, then it will automatically bring you to the number, or it will automatically dial the number, or it will bring you to the website.
We also
I just wanted
put
to mention
updates on the Baltimore County Department of Social Services website, so you can check that occasionally to see updates on information and announcements.
I just wanted to mention very quickly that we do have several people that are on audio only. So if you guys would like to provide a quick rundown of maybe a couple of the primary phone numbers that people might attempt to reach, or email addresses they might attempt to reach verbally because they were unable to read the slideshow.
Of course. So the email address that I'm going to be providing is for the Family Violence Unit, but if you have any questions for the other two panelists, then we can always forward that to them. So the email address is B as in boy, A as in apple, L as in lime, T as in tomato, C as in cow, O as in octopus, dot, A as in apple, D as in dog, V as in violin, O as in octopus, C as in cat, A as in apple, C as in cat, Y at maryland.gov, all spelled out. So again, that's baltco.advocacy@maryland.gov.
I just wanted to add something as well. We do understand that we do have some victims that we work with who are non-English speaking. There are translation services available. So if someone were to call 911 and they are non-English speaking, the 911 operator can help get a translator there. We work with what's called language line. So if we have someone who is non-English speaking, we can still communicate. So those services are there if they do need assistance with translation.
Are there any other questions or comments? Any other questions coming through the chat? Okay, well, I thank you all for all your participation and help today on today's webinar, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.